All right, well, welcome everybody. So glad you could join us. For those in the southern part of the state, joining us on a very stormy evening. You are joining Mining Wisconsin Riverways Past and Present Issues and Activism. This is a 4-part series. Tonight is part 2. If you missed part 1, it was a wonderful discussion led by several tribal members who we were honored to learn from. They discussed their relationships to the waters of the state, and specifically the Wolf River and the Menominee River. If you missed that part, you can go watch it. Still, it was recorded. It's on the wolfriveractioncommittee.com website. Tonight's session will be recorded as well, so if you want to go back and watch it again or let others know, you can do that. There are 2 more discussions coming up in the next few weeks. The next one is July 21st, where the focus will be mining and the environment, and August 4th, where the focus will be the regulatory mining process. This series is put on by the Wolf River Action Committee. This committee is a group of tribal nations, tribal members, local activists, conservation groups all across the state and specifically the region around the Wolf River that came together to discuss how to work together to protect our waters from the threat of mining pollution. Tonight's and this whole panel series is sponsored by Wisconsin Conservation Voices, Wisconsin Native Vote, the Humanities Program and Center at UW-Madison, Midwest Environmental Advocates, Minneconnicum Community Rebuilders. And I want to give a special recognition to 2 people. One is Dee Sweet from Wisconsin Conservation Voters, who came up with the idea for the panel series, and Justin Huckleberry. We are very fortunate to have her as a UW student coordinating both the panel series and the website wolfriveractioncommittee.com. I am Allison Werner. I am the Policy and Advocacy Director with River Alliance of Wisconsin. I'll be moderating tonight's discussion. We are fortunate to have 3 amazing speakers with us tonight. They have been water allies for many, many years. They've been working to help protect our waters from the threat of mining pollution and also other threats to water quality in the state. And you know, I use the word threat because we are fortunate right now that these mining projects are just that, a threat. They haven't come to fruition. The state of Wisconsin, we have fought back the Crandon mine proposal. We fought back the iron mining proposal that GTEC brought in the Pinocchis a few years back. You'll hear tonight about the folks Dale and others are working with to stop the Back 40 project in the Upper Peninsula. We now have a project called company Badger Minerals proposing a project in Oneida County that would threaten the Wolf River. They're threats only right now because of people you're going to hear from tonight and the other great advocates all across the state. Again, tribal nations, conservation groups, local residents who are standing up to protect our waters. And that's the stories you're going to hear tonight. You're going to hear from these 3 people about how they got involved, why they got involved, and actions that you can also take to protect your waters. Again, so we're very fortunate to have these 3 water allies share their stories with us tonight. I'm going to introduce them one at a time. They're going to get a little time to share their stories, and then we will take questions at the end. You can type your question in the chat, and then we'll answer as many of them as we can at the end of the 3 speakers. So our first speaker we are honored to have tonight is Anaquet, or Guy Ryder. He is a traditional Menominee who resides on the Menominee Reservation. He is the executive director of Menominee Indian community organization called Minneconnicum. He's also a community organizer, activist, author, amateur archaeologist, and lecturer. He is also a member of Menominee Cultural Constitutional Task Force. He has organized a lot of events that have uplifted the human condition and demonstrated how enriching the Menominee culture is. He's lectured at universities on the connection Menominee Indians have to the Menominee River. He's also written articles for Environmental Health News and others. When he isn't working, you'll find him enjoying his time with his wife and children, and he is an advocate for Indigenous people everywhere. Guy, welcome. Please take it away and share your story.
Yeah, po so, Waiwanan. I wanted to just, before we kind of get started, I always think it would be good if we, especially in a time like this, that we can pause a little bit and maybe just breathe collectively together, a couple deep breaths. I think when we talk about the water and trying to protect that and all our natural world, it's always good to slow down a little bit and think about these things. So if you don't mind, just for a couple seconds, we could take a couple deep breaths together. Ready? In, out, in, out, in, out. There you are, Annan. So that's a pretty good introduction. Thank you for that. I guess I wanted to just start and talk about um, how I got started. I guess I think for me, um, activism or any kind of protection of natural resources started probably at birth. I think I had great grandmothers and grandfathers and grandpas and grandmas and aunts and uncles that are all involved in various issues. And as a young kid, I grew up just trying to walk lightly on the earth and understanding what my relationship is with the natural world. So it goes back quite a ways, for me to why I am so in love, I guess, with the earth and all the natural things and what it has to offer. I mean, it's definitely and most importantly cultural, and our language speaks our sacred Menominee language is so connected to the natural world. It's almost impossible not to be so in love with the world. But I I guess in this, for me, like activism started, if that's what you want to call it. I don't know if I would call it that. I would almost call it more of protecting I'm for pro life, those types of pro all life, natural world included. Um, so I remember as a young kid at 10 years old, going up to the docks or the boat landings up north when the Ojibways were fighting for the fishing rights and the treaty rights. And I had to be maybe 10, 11 years old, around that age. Not necessarily, I wasn't, informed completely in them days about what it was I was doing, but, I was there. I remember as I got a little bit older with the Crandon mine fight, walking and marching and doing those kind of things. Not that I was completely aware of all the issues and things, but definitely seeing what our elders were doing and seeing the prayers and the way in which they communicated with the natural world and with each other. Um, I have many stories of my relatives during the time we as a tribe, the Menominee Indian tribe of Wisconsin here, was terminated, and the just the tremendous amount of organization and organizing it took to get us restored. And there was so many people you could mention during that time that some of them are still here, some of them had passed on, but we just had tremendous leadership all throughout our history. And I'm so grateful to even be able to be here and stand up and do what I do. So I'm very grateful for that. This particular, what you can see on my screen behind me it says No Back 40 Mine, and that is a project that started on they're trying to start it on the Menominee River, but we've been pretty active and been pretty strong, trying to get in their way and make a lot of hurdles for them. But the very first thing that happened to me was that I caught wind of it from a friend of a friend that just happened to mention it in conversation, and I don't think that person really knew that I was even Menominee. And I don't even think that they knew that like the Menominee River had significance to the Menominee people. But you know, I knew after hearing it that in our long storied oral history, our creation story starts at the mouth of that river, and it's an extremely important part of who we are as Menominee. So I knew that, and then I started to like just look around my community and try to see if anybody knew anything or if anybody was doing anything. At the time, it was new and not really too many people knew about it. There were some folks within our tribe that did know, but it was like, you know, from, I don't know, 15 years ago now or even longer. Um, you know, some of the things that were happening up there, and there was never really any kind of permitting process in place. So it was just about hearsay, or just like we thought we wanted to do this and do that. But a lot of things happen, and you can Google the Back 40 Mine to get all the history on it. But basically, so I started to look around my community and didn't see anything happening. And, you know, I started to get vocal at gatherings here on the reservation. I remember, you know, talking to my uncles about, you know, somebody should write letters, and, you know, so somebody should be putting this on Facebook, and somebody should be calling the tribe, and somebody this and somebody that. And after he got done listening to me and my rant, he just basically looked me in my eye and he said, well, you're somebody. And I thought, well, dog darn it, that's true. I am somebody. So I got to work on trying to do everything I can, and to get informed was the most important. I wasn't really informed on what sulfide mining was and its devastating effects to the natural world. But I started to read as much as I could, tried to figure out as much as I could. Then I just started to attend events here in the community, and I made up my own flyers, and, you know, I got my own table, and just, you know, start talking to people, and seeing, you know, if there was any interest. And I remember on the very first event I put on, I had a notebook that I think like I had a question at the top saying like, if you could tell the mining company something, what would you tell them? And I would just have people write in there, you know, whatever their answer was. And I just found that the other day, and I was going through some of that stuff, and it was really inspiring to hear some of well, I didn't hear it, but read some of the words that were in there, you know, and some of the things I had forgotten, and some of the things that I definitely still carry with me on a day-to-day basis. And one of the, you know, more important things for me was one big event we did really quickly, and I'll move, you know, past this microphone. But one of the things that I did really quickly was help to organize a sacred water walk from our reservation here at a very sacred place for us called the Kashina Falls. And we walked all the way up to the location of the potential mine site. I believe it was like 2006 we did that, somewhere around there. Basically, Grandma Josephine Mendamen helped us organize that, and there was a lot of others like Mary Webster, Orland Caldwell, Siobhan Marks were some of the folks that helped us early on, Don Wilbur. And you know, we just put that walk together, and really not trying to make it a protest, or we weren't holding signs, or we weren't, you know, trying to get loud or anything. What Grandma Josephine, and God bless her, she's passed away now, but that time in my life has given me so much, and fueled me so much, and I'm amazed to have that time. But she just basically said that, you know, we're going to walk with intent, and we're going to walk, you know, on the earth, and we're going to walk in a way in which we're going to think about all those animals, all those people, all those things that are going to be affected by this potential mine. And you know, it was 126 miles. We were able to cover that ground in 3 days, and it was one of the best things that I ever did in my life. And, you know, done multiple water walks now for many other occasions, and I was really just grateful to be a part of that. And, you know, I'm excited about still what we're doing, the fight goes on, as Allison and Paula and Dale know, there's so many things, I think, that need attention, that need our people to wake up and to see. And this like the system that is in place is it makes it so difficult for a common person to navigate it, and it can get so frustrating, and it's easy to throw your hands up and just say, you know what, somebody else will deal with it, and piss on it, and excuse my language, you don't have to worry about it. But I just want you to remember, you are somebody. Thank you.
I think that's such a powerful message, right? It's Margaret Mead that has, the quote about, what one person can do to change the world, right? And yeah, we're all somebody. We all can do one thing to help this movement go forward. That's wonderful words. Thank you so much, Guy. I really, really appreciate it. We will have lots of questions for you in just a few minutes after we hear from Dale and Paula. Dale Burry is next, and Dale is a native of Menominee, Michigan. He and his wife, Leah Jane, retired back up to the north after spending some time down south in Tennessee, working for companies like Tyson Foods and having an amazing career working in the music industry in Nashville. They are founders of a group called the Coalition to Save the Menominee River. They and others have been working very hard on the Back 40 project that Aniquette just talked about. So Dale, the floor is yours, as it were, to tell us about you, your story, how you got involved, and what your organization's about.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you this evening. And I would like to, although I was born and raised here, I in the Menominee County area, I never had the opportunity really to meet or work with any Native Americans. I really knew nothing about them. And when my wife, Leah Jane, and I were still living in Nashville, a good friend of my wife's, B. Spears, passed away. B. Spears was the bass player for Willie Nelson forever. And when he passed away, we went to the funeral. And of course, here was 5 big custom Willie Nelson buses pulling into the parking lot. And all the Texans got off with their big hats and their snakeskin boots. And we got inside the chapel, and there was Native Americans there. And the gentleman who was a tribal leader for the Ojibwe tribe, he actually conducted the funeral. He was personal friends with B. And so this tribal leader got up and he said, we're a little different, but I want to explain the similarities of our cultures. And as he unfolded their cultural beliefs, it was very close to what we believed as Christians, or following the Word of God. So that was my first introduction. And I was really impressed with the emphasis that they took on our environment, our waters, our soils, our everything, our wildlife, everything that they had, they were grateful for. And so that was our first exposure. And then my wife and I retired and decided to come up this way and spend our retirement years. So we built our retirement dream home, thinking this is going to be where we're going to live until we, go on. And and then we heard about this threat of the Aquila mine project. And at the time we built the house, it was like in a stagnant period. And then all of a sudden they came into, hitting the newspapers, hitting the presses, and and I'll just add this little story, that in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, God gave man dominion over the land, the sea, the animals, everything. Dominion means that you will be able to lead, or you'll be able to care for all this important things, but you also have to take care. You have to preserve it. You have to culture it. You have to, it was a mission that man was given. And, you know, we spent untold amount of time talking, praying, and if you ever feel called to do something, it's a little niggling that you cannot escape from. It just keeps working on you and working on you. So we started going to a couple of these little cell groups, if you will. And what it was people gathering and telling their story of why they don't want the mine, because, well, my family has owned river property for 3 generations, and we're not going to allow that mine. So it was all individual grassroots type folks that gathered, but there was no organizational structure of how it was going to be done. So we held a meeting on April 7th, was it, of 2017, and 28 people showed up, and that were interested in forming a group, which we did. We had very favorable response. We had representatives there from everywhere. And so we started the Coalition to Save the Menominee River, and we incorporated, I think in June, we were able to get all the paperwork done. And really, you know, I don't know anything about mining. That isn't what I do know. I do know that I don't want it here. And I do know that it's detrimental to our area, and that unless people pull themselves up by the bootstraps and get out and make something happen, they're going to walk on it. They're going to walk all over us. You have to, like Guy mentioned, little roadblocks, you know, divert their attention, divert their finances, whatever we can do, we don't want it. And there is scientific proof. There has never been a sulfide mine that ever did not contaminate or pollute the region's water. And it doesn't take a scientist to figure out. Physics are physics. You can't change that. And when they mine this ore and it's subjected to oxygen in the atmosphere and snow and rain and everything that we deal with, you're gonna have contamination. So that is what we base our entire organization on, is the negatives of mining and the positives of trying to keep our area clean and pure for the next generations. You know, it isn't about us anymore. It's about the children, the grandchildren, great-grand. What are we leaving? What are we leaving this earth to the next generations? And basically that's what we've tried to accomplish. Right now we have about, I'm guessing, 250 volunteers. Facebook is about 4,500 people that follow us. It's been kind of a lull right now because of the virus, because Aquila is trying to refinance their financial page. And so it's been a slow period of time, but they're starting to ramp up, and we too are ramping up. So, but you know, there's nothing special about any one of us. We're common, ordinary people that have taken an interest in preserving what we have. So anybody that wants to start a group, the reason we named it the Coalition to Save the Menominee River is because all of these other little segmented groups, we tried to provide an umbrella. And since that time, we have retained our own environmental attorney staff. We have an attorney in Ann Arbor, we have one in Milwaukee, and we have one in Green Bay. We're very well prepared for what comes down the pike. We also, on the tailings dam, which is a big thing right now, we're waiting for the application to come in. The tailings dam application, when it's submitted, we do have a very well-known world expert on tailings dams that is standing by and waiting to evaluate that application, style, structure, safety, all of the important things. And this might be a premise for our next case, or at least the public hearing. So it's not, it's not anything that anybody else can't do. Everybody should get involved. I think it's your duty. I think people, they owe that portion of their wheelhouse to protect the environment for the future generations. How am I doing on time there, Allison? Am I over?
You're not over yet.
I'm not over yet. Okay.
No contested case.
Yes, we also were in Michigan State Court with a wetlands case. We gave testimony for 19 days. And during those 19 days, we had everybody from geologists to Eagle to all of the facets that are implicated into the wetlands permitting process. The testimony ended the last part of October of 2019. We are awaiting the decision from Judge Poulter, and nothing has been said or done yet. So with that, either or. If we win, we'll probably end up in court to defend our position. And if we lose, we'll probably end up in court. Next court, we'll go to circuit court.
They only have one
But
permit.
we're prepared to do that. And right now, Aquila is out looking for more money, and they are able to get some. They don't have enough. They don't have nearly enough what it's going to take to do what they want to do.
They said they have all.
Yeah, and then the other thing is, we found that in their press releases and to their own investors, they're not telling the truth. These are untruths. How can people? I don't get it. How can people tell their investors bad information?
They have all the permits.
They say they have all the state and federal permits. That's not true at all. They have one. They have a water discharge permit. And they have about, 5 to go, four more to go. So this is what we deal with.
Mhm.
And a lot of our work, because of the coalition, we're a nonprofit, we're out fundraising. And of course, the virus has really curtailed our budgets. So it's very important. It takes money. There isn't anybody in the coalition that gets paid. We all do this of our own free will, and there isn't anybody that gets paid. Nobody gets compensated. All we get is a big thank you. And but I'm grateful. We can be in parades, and people will come up to our trailer and say thank you. And that's all there is.
And that's worth it.
And that's worth every second that we donate to this cause.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dale. I'm hearing a theme of the second person tonight who has stepped up to say, I am somebody who can take action here. I thank you for sharing that. And we'll have questions for you in just a few minutes. I want to introduce our third speaker this evening that we're fortunate to have with us, who is Paula Mohan. She's a political scientist whose research focuses on intergovernmental relationships between tribes and state and federal governments, and how to best enhance tribal sovereignty within those relationships. She currently teaches in the American Indian Studies program at UW-Madison. Paula is a lifelong resident of Wisconsin and grew up in central Wisconsin and later northern Wisconsin in a community bordering the Lac du Flambeau Ojibwa Reservation. She's been an active ally with tribes since high school. Paula, thank you for joining us this evening. Please share your story and your thoughts about how people can be water allies.
Okay. Can you hear me now? I mean, just like the commercial. Okay. Like Guy, my first involvement was in high school during the spearfishing issues. And Act 31 was not in place. I knew nothing about that. I knew the tribes. My best friend was from Lac du Flambeau. I didn't know anything about tribal sovereignty. I didn't know about the treaties. I didn't know about ceded territory. All I knew is that our school almost closed down because there were fights between the children of resort owners And the tribal members, and this is Conover, it's just outside Eagle River, which is a little south of Minocqua. So I went to the boat landings to see what was going on, and I was lucky enough to be pulled into and mentored by the Witnesses for Nonviolence. And what Witnesses for Nonviolence taught me a couple of really important things. The first thing I would say they taught me is that this is a movement that is Native-centered and Native-led. If you are an ally or a co-conspirator, or however you define your role, you are not the center. You are not the person that's going to step in and direct the whole thing. Our role at the boat landings is we linked arms and we were a buffer. We stood between, I mean, the Spears were out on the water until very late at night. Then the DNR officials were there. Then family members of the Spears were there. That's where the drum was. That's where we were then. We were a buffer. We were linked, our arms were linked, and we were a buffer between the angry, screaming, drunk people who were screaming out, spear kill a pregnant squaw and save a walleye. Our job was not to react. In fact, we had training, very specific training. If you react to this, you are going to be making yourself the center. Your job is to be a buffer, to deflect some of this energy and violence away from the families of the Spears onto yourself as a community member. And you're going to model calm behavior and peaceful behavior. And they talked me down afterwards. And that was my first introduction. But at the beginning, again, it was very narrow. I was there to support my friend in high school. By the way, I lied to my parents. There was no way that they wanted me at the boat landings, but I was 16 and I did what I wanted when I could get away with it, I guess. And at the time, I thought I was just supporting my friend. But ultimately, after the different Voight decisions came down and the co-management of resources between tribes and the DNR were established when GLIFIC was put into place, that benefits everybody up there. The fact that tribes now have some say over what happens in ceded territory means that that watershed has protection it would not have had otherwise. So the number one thing I would say to allies or co-conspirators or to especially non-natives that want to get involved is you're there to build relationships in a good way. You are not directing this. Allow tribes to take the leadership and take your cues from them. They will tell you what they need. One terrible mistake made during the fight against the Pinocchio taconite mine is that a group of young anarchists, and this is just, they were at the very beginning stages of, there was some exploratory drilling that was being done. Paul Demain and the Chippewa Federation had created what was called HELP, that stands for Harvest Education Learning Project. And what they did is they established this, it was like a camp, and it was near the mining site. And it was there for two reasons. One, to watch the mining company and see what they did, but secondly, to explore alternative economic development that was sustainable. What had been there before the mining company? The mining company was saying, we'll bring jobs to Iron County. It's, we are very depressed in this time frame. And so what about tapping? What about tapping maple trees? What about sustainable agriculture? What else was up there? So these anarchists meant well, and they planned their action to be autonomous. But what they did is they, put masks and bandanas over their face, highly identifiable, by the way. And they went during the exploratory drilling, and they tried to disrupt what the geologists were doing. And it was pretty low-level stuff. They put branches in the road. One of the women grabbed the phone from a geologist who was trying to film it. They superglued some of the locks. They screamed words at them and went back. They were staying at the HELP camp. And they went back and said, okay, we stopped the machines for a day. Well, it didn't take very long for the Iron County Sheriff to show up back at HELP camp and say, okay, we now have some complaints and we're prepared to shut down the camp altogether. So unless someone will step forward and take responsibility for doing this action, we're closing everything down. So a young woman stepped forward, took sole responsibility for it. But in the meantime, the tribes got the fallout from that. That allowed GTEC, the mining company, to have a pretext to hire a private mercenary company, Bulletproof Securities, and bring these mercenaries wearing desert camouflage up in the North Woods with assault rifles pointing at people. These young people thought that it was autonomous. Nothing's autonomous. Everything is connected and everything reflects back on the movement. So, I mean, the poor young woman, she ended up being indicted for felony, ended up having to go to jail for almost a year and be on probation after that. It was completely unnecessary, but it happened. And it didn't stop the mine. The tribes wanted the mine stopped long-term. They didn't want to just stop for a day. So that's the number one thing. You will never have, as a non-native, even if you've lived there and you live on the water and you love the area, you will never have the same primary and sacred connection to that land and watershed that a native person will have. You won't have it. So what you do is you understand your place. And I know that sounds really, well, it sounds like what it sounds, but you learn. You're there to learn, you're there to support. And ultimately, if tribes get more sovereignty, if tribes get more power, that will benefit everyone in the watershed. Secondly, and again, I'm an academic, I have 3 points. Secondly, learn the process. As Dale mentioned, one of the issues with this is we all assume that there are all these regulations that are in place and that they protect the water and nothing can happen that's untoward. And then you get in there in an actual situation and you recognize that while mining companies may really scrimp when it comes to safety measures, you know, or constructing a tailings dam that supposedly is supposed to last for perpetuity, where they never scrimp is on lawyers and on lobbyists. They're ahead of you. They anticipated this from another project. They've gone in there and they've bought a legislator to get them a piece of legislation that weakens the interpretation of how a regulation is applied. They changed the definition narrowly, but it has major effects, which you find out. So what you learn secondly, if you want to be an effective ally, is you learn the process, and it's boring and it's time consuming and it will give you headaches out of your unbelievable headaches when you look at all these different stages and steps. But what you can do is you break it down and you find out where their weaknesses are. You find out where they failed to completely close a gap. You find out where you can counter move against it with another legislative effort by someone who's not happy about what's happening with the earth. And you can rely upon veterans from other struggles. There was a hearing in September, I think it was July 2018 up in Oneida County. And it was before the Oneida County Board. And it was regarding whether or not there should be any kind of limitation put on whether the Lynn deposit, which was county-owned land, could be leased for mining operations. And I know Allison was very involved in the referendum that came out of that movement, but this was the first movement, the first meeting. And what the county board was up against is Act 134. By the way, everybody on this call was in Ladysmith testifying against that piece of legislation sponsored by Senator Tom Tiffany, which did go through, as we all know. But one of the provisions of that new mining law, Act 134, is there's a clause in it about state preemption, which is if a local government passes an ordinance or any kind of zoning law that is too strict, it is viewed as contradicting a state law, and therefore it is preempted, is declared void. So these poor county supervisors are in the position of trying to thread this needle where they're listening to their constituents say, close it down, we want our water protected. We got, you know, wetlands all over this area. We don't want that here. And their attorney who's saying, okay, you can't do that legally. No, you can't do that legally. And who showed up? Who comes in the door but Mike Wiggins, tribal chair of Bad River, and Pinocchio Pete Rasmussen up in Ashland, straight from the GTEC fight, who came up and said, okay, guys, this is what we learned. There were people from the Back 40 mine there. It was nice. I got to sit next to Dave Bloon from Sierra Club, and he said, well, I haven't seen some of these people since the Crandon fight. So there were people there that were ready for him. Al Gettix was there. He was ready for him. The tribal chairs were there. They were ready for him. And that's what the mining company has to deal with. And that's my third point. Whatever power and money and insider games that these mining companies play, they can never compete with the resistance that comes from a hive mind, the creativity of a hive mind, and the fighting on multiple fronts. And that's what I think is so incredible about the organization that Dale and Leah Jane head. There are multiple fronts going on. There are protests at the Ogden Club. There are musicians, there's fundraising, there are letters to the editor, there are people getting ready for hearings. Everybody has a place. If you have a talent, there's a place for you. If you don't understand how to read legislation, go on a water walk, as long as you're respectful and you understand the protocols and you understand the rules. Looking at this group of people, the mining company is single-minded. They want a profit. They want to get a profit to their shareholders. They want to do it as quickly as possible. They want to build a mine. They want that mine to be within legal boundaries, and they'll push those legal boundaries as much as they can. But at the same time, they want to spend as little as possible to do that. They cannot compete with a group of people. I mean, look at Guy in 2017 went to the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. He brought the Back 40 issue into international context. And a year later, a delegation from Menominee Nation went down there, and Wapanukwi, she was 9, right, at that age? She spoke before the UN. The mining company can't keep up. They got people on staff, they lay them off because there's no money, those people go away. This coalition, people are not being paid, but there's a community. They show up. They will always show up. They're going to drive over from Michigan, and they're going to be in Oneida County, and they're going to bring all the knowledge they have of this hydra-headed mining company that we're dealing with, and give that information to people in Oneida County. They don't have a chance. As Dale said, they're running out of money because that's what they run on. They don't run on sovereignty. What's the other thing you did, Guy, that was so cool is you got the rights of nature added to the Menominee Constitution, which all of a sudden means the Menominee River now has some legal recognition within the Menominee Constitution. That's a legal precept that we can push forward and get the state to recognize. So, as we all got the news yesterday about the Dakota Access Pipeline being closed down because they did not undergo a complete environmental impact statement, as everyone told them back in 2016 when it was closed down, what you see is this stuff, it's like an icicle. It's weird to be talking about icicles when it's about 95 degrees in this room, but an icicle is just little drops. It just sits there, and all of a sudden a whole ridge breaks off. And I think that's what we're seeing, and that's what's going to happen. They're going to be driven away just like GTAC was driven away because they didn't have enough money. Back 40 will run out of money, what they're giving all their money to Orion as it is, and future profits. They've got nothing less to run on. Now they're in Wisconsin thinking this is more fertile ground for them. They've got a whole coalition of creative, hive-minded people that are there to meet them. All right, I think that's...
Yeah. Paula, that's wonderful. Thank you for giving some definition to what it means to be an ally and listing some of the great work many organizations are doing, especially the Coalition to Save the Menominee and Minneconaucum. Dale and Guy, I'd like to put the first question to you. Paula gave a nice summary of all the different ways to be an ally, all the sorts of different activities, and you both hit on some as well. Can you give some specific examples? If someone, our hope tonight is the folks listening and watching are inspired. They're realizing they are somebody too that can take action. What's some of the first actions? What's some of your recommendations of what people could do if they're inspired tonight to protect the Wolf River and or the Menominee River? Guy, Dale, who'd like to take that first? Dale, there we go.
Okay. Actually, the biggest thing is to go to a website, get involved. If you want to become a volunteer, boy, we can use you. And I'm going to say one more thing about how the coalition started. As you started, Paula, you made reference to this. You need skilled people to do skilled tasks. And we were so fortunate that, and I'm a big prayer warrior, and we say, well, we need a grant writer. And lo and behold, this gentleman comes up who is retired from the public school systems. He was the school grant writer, and he's been writing our grants. And we need tech people for Facebook. We need, all these things that you need, and it has been provided for us. And we are so grateful. But if you want to get involved, to be a volunteer, if you want to start your own, I encourage everybody to, boy, I would love some other people to get into this. Write letters and become, as Guy mentioned, become vocal. Tell them how you feel. And it's the people who should be driving this democracy, not the other way around. And I also heard Paula make mention about our Senator Tiffany. He did a radio interview this past week, and he said that Wisconsin has the strictest mining laws in the world. And people should find comfort in that, according to his statement. But you know what? I'm a firm believer that you can create laws, and only the honest people will respect the law. Anybody else, you'll find an overabundance of occupants in our prison systems. But nevertheless, that isn't how to solve a problem. You got to solve problems with people. People have the right. They have a right in this America, according to our Constitution, to be voiced, be heard, and be seen and be heard. And we have to use that. And so as we push forward, get yourself aligned with somebody that you think that is doing the work that you've been niggled to do, and join in. I know right now with the virus, it's difficult. We've been doing Zoom virtual meetings like everybody. It's definitely created a problem, because we're social people. We're made to be social people. So, but anyway, get involved. Write letters and just do it.
Thanks, Dale. Guy, what would you like to add about specific things people could start doing if they're inspired tonight?
Yeah, well, I hope they are inspired. I don't know how much more our Earth can withstand what the destruction and the domination and all the way in which it's being approached and dealt with. But I think one of the most important things is to think about how do we do things differently. How do we really actually look at like system change, and what would that be? The marching and the writing letters and all those things are useful. They did them in the 60s and they did them before that, but we're still in a place where we're still here in some ways, and I would challenge our young people, who are the ones that are going to be taking this on as us older. Well, I'll put myself in the older category, but I'm not that old. You know what I mean? That these young people, are going to be taking over these leadership positions, but they also need to think about how are they going to come at it from a different way. The drum circles and protesting, those types of things, walking, marching, those types of things may not work. And we need to come up with new ideas about how to go about that. And one of the other things that I really think about quite a bit is all of us that have been involved in these types of fights, anybody that gets involved, you're in it for the long run. And a lot of times you got to have thick skin, and you also have to have a pretty good motor, because it's never over, it seems. And you take a lot of losses along the way, sometimes small, sometimes big, and it can get personal as well. But that doesn't mean that, like, because we're in a public hearing and it's real stale and strict, and you got 3 minutes to say this, and, you know, tell me everything in 30 seconds about who you are and where you come from, you know, all those things. There's things that we can do to make this fun. It doesn't always have to be about serious things. You know, there's so much creativity that we could bring to this, and the more minds, the more young people, the more ideas we have. You know, like, we can be a multifaceted you know, opposition, just like you said before about Dale, and you know, we knew that right away coming into the Back 40 Mine, that the only way that this thing is gonna go away is if it's a death by 1,000 swords. You know, so that's the approach we took, is, you know, and still continue to do. But I'm just saying, I think that when we start, there's no limits to what we can think about and how creatively we can fight back, and stand up for ourselves and give us a voice. Maybe our voices in theater, maybe our voices in music, maybe our voices in art. It's all necessary and it's all important. And man, we need you guys.
Thank you, guys. So important. Paula, is there anything you'd like to add to that question about specific actions people can take? Anything you want to add from what you said before?
I agree with Guy. And that's the one thing we haven't talked about, is how much fun this is. These are some of the best people you will ever meet in your life. And you're going to hear stories, and you're going to hear laughter, and you're going to taste really good food, and you're going to build some of the most important relationships you'll have in your life. And yeah, when you watch the courage and you learn the wisdom and you talk to somebody and you learn from them and you pass that on, it's really enriching. It's not something that you're just giving, you're getting back to. So I'm down with fun. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and you know, it also, you know, I appreciated, Guy, that you had us do the breathing and in the beginning, because this is a long haul. There's a lot of heaviness in this work and in the world right now. And it is so important to take those pauses and, yes, to have fun. You know, there were folks paddling the Menominee River this weekend, you know, to honor the river and celebrate the river. So many things. Dale and Leah Jane and their group have talked about the music they have done as well. Those are so important. But Paula, the one word I want to kind of lift up that you mentioned is the relationship piece. And yes, amongst the volunteers, amongst the advocates and all the groups working on this, there's definitely relationships that are built. But one of the things folks can do too is build relationships with their elected officials. And town board level, county board level, city council, all the way up to state legislators and federal. Those elected officials who represent you need to know these are issues that you care about. If they don't hear from you, they're going to say, well, I didn't hear from constituents. I don't think my constituents care about this issue, or I didn't hear from enough of them. And once they hear from enough constituents, you've put this issue on their radar screen. They're having their staff pay attention. They're paying attention. They're now concerned about what their future looks like if they also aren't supporting the issues their constituents care about. What I've seen as success from these, you know, organizations you've learned about tonight and others is those relationships can make all the difference. The Coalition to Save the Menominee and, you know, the tribal nations as well and other groups have built relationships at the federal level with certain legislators who've now been brave enough to come out and say they're against the Back 40 proposal. Why? Because they heard from their constituents, and their constituents told them things like, hey, this is risking our drinking water. If the Menominee River gets contaminated from mining pollution, this is going to jeopardize the drinking water of my community. Well, that gets, it's one, it's true. And two, it gets folks paying attention to go, oh, okay, I need to look into this. So please, oh, you know, that's, you know, something you can do. You know, Dale mentioned, of course, you know, we're all in this difficult time of, you know, being distanced from folks, but phone calls, letters, emails, those things can still happen. Your elected officials are still answering, still listening. So that's just one other important thing I want to bring up is those relationships and reaching out to your elected officials. We have just a few minutes left tonight, and I'm looking through the questions here. One of our next ones is, you all hit on this a little bit, but if one of you would like to expand on why is mining bad for the environment and specifically the Wolf River? So what's at risk here if this Badger Minerals project goes forward, and what is the risk to the environment in the river?
Well,
Go ahead, Guy.
yeah, that sounds like a Badger Mineral question. I don't know if that's Tom Quigley that put that question in there, but you know, there's so much. I mean, it really is devastation to the river, to the natural ecosystem, with the chemicals they use and the way in which they do it with the machines and things. Yes, right now they're only exploring. And I don't mean only that's it, but if you were to look at go onto the website of the Wolf River page and look at some of the destruction that has happened there with the clear cutting and getting the equipment in there. I think the Wolf River is one of two rivers that's a natural scenic river in Wisconsin. You know, it's a pristine river, and a sulfide mine that's going to leak chemicals into the top of it, because they always do, you know, is something we obviously don't want. There's three Native American tribes that are within this river, where it goes right through their reservation, are very adjacent to it, and many other communities all the way right down to Lake Winnebago with our sturgeon. And as everybody knows, we know what flows downhill, right? I mean, that's kind of the way it goes, and it affects so many people, and one little thing, you know, affects so many people downriver that we all should have a say in that, and we should all definitely be able to voice our concerns. And you know what, we should all be able to say, you know what, this is BS and we ain't doing it no more. You know, there's so many scientific terminologies, and like I said, you can look up sulfide mining, go to grandfather and Google and figure it out, and find out more about it. But I mean, it's yes, the common things are, you know, we need gold, we need these things, we need that, we need this, and they always try to paint the picture of that we need more and more and more, and we're running out of gold, and we're running. But you know, they never take into account that you know, recycling, or if you know, I'm pretty sure we're smart enough to figure out other ways to get things and do things, and you know, put some real research into how do we live sustainably on this earth, rather than tearing it up and getting so close to a pristine river or any kind of water, and the only drinking water we have, and pollute it. It doesn't make sense.
Thank you so much, Guy, for answering the question. And that question is a lovely segue, as it were, as we're winding down for today's panel, that in 2 weeks on July 21st, the panelists are going to talk about mining and the environment. So those of you watching right now, if you'd like to learn more about how the mining process works, what pollution has happened from past mining projects that have happened around the world, what the risks are to our water, the panelists will go into way more detail. I mean, the folks here tonight covered it quite well, but we'll learn even more about that on July 21st with the Mining and Environment panel discussion. You can watch for information about that on Facebook invites, but also again, the website you can go to is wolfriveractioncommittee.com. We also talked tonight about the fun and the arts. On the website, wolfriveractioncommittee.com, you will see an email address you can go to if you have content you'd like to contribute, music, poetry, art that you've done related to the Wolf River or our waters of the state. The folks involved with this committee would be welcome to consider that to add to the website, because part of this website is to have a place to have more education and celebration about protecting our waters, Wolf River in particular, and others that are threatened from this kind of pollution from mining. I want to again thank you so much, Aniquette, Dale, and Paula, for taking the time to share your stories and inspiring us all tonight. I hope you all watching learned something and are motivated. And to use Guy's words, I hope everyone's realized there's somebody and you decide what role you can take in this movement going forward. So thank you so much. Hope to see you again in 2 weeks.